Well, God knows we needed the rain. It had got very, very dry. I actually heard up in Tazewell County, I think, had put a ban on burning last week. And so the rain's good. But when it rains, you know what's going to happen now? It's going to get muddy. And it's supposed to rain all week long. Okay? So by the time we get to the end of the week, we're probably going to be griping and complaining about, I wish it would stop raining for just a little while now. You know, we'll be saying things like we were almost in a drought, and now we're in a monsoon, and we'll be ready for it to quit raining. It's hard to find that happy medium, you know. But it's going to get muddy. And those of you, hunting season's here, and man alive, when I came down 52 this morning, and I saw all of these four-wheelers and ATVs, and for those of you watching by Facebook, we welcome you. And if you don't understand, just to give you an explanation about the mountains here in West Virginia, it's ATV country, and there's trails all over the place, hundreds of miles. Come ride and come visit Voice of Praise. But there was hundreds maybe, or dozens at least, of ATVers everywhere this morning. And even though we didn't get all that much rain last night, a lot of them were covered in mud. I have a feeling some of them had been to the mud pit. I've never been there. I've watched videos, and you can YouTube that, and what have you. But there's a place up just not too far from here, actually. But it's called the Mud Pit. Now, I struggle because I struggle because I'm a Harley owner, and it's got chrome, and I like the chrome to shine. Okay, I struggle with buying a $10,000 ATV and burying it up in a pit of mud. I struggle with the logic there, but it's whatever it takes, and whatever appeals to somebody. But I do know there are people that get hung in that mud pit, and they have to have somebody else to pull them out. Now, this morning, it's a lengthy title. So you're stuck, you say. Well, I got good news for you. Mud won't last forever. I would like to point out, however, in the backdrop of the slide there, where you see the tire of a vehicle that is buried down in the mud, and it's very obvious that they're spinning. They are stuck. I would like to point out, however, that is a Ford emblem in the middle of that hubcap. We found something that they are good for: sermon illustrations. Now, bless God, I have a Ford. My old Ford truck's got to do me this winter as well. So you're stuck in mud. You're stuck. You say, but I've got news for you this morning. The mud is not going to last forever. It may rain all week long this week. That's what they're saying. But the mud won't last forever. It will dry up again. It was muddy back in the spring of the year, but now we know up until today it's been very dry. I want you to go to Psalms chapter 40, the 40th Psalms. In the 40th Psalm, we read about the Psalm. We read about a song of David. And David is a man he had problems. He had difficulties. Some of them were self-inflicted. Some of them just happened. You've heard me say all of that before. Most of you anyway have heard me say that. Sometimes we cause our problems. Sometimes problems just happen. Sometimes God, He doesn't cause them, but sometimes He will allow them. But David said, I waited patiently for the Lord, and He turned to me and He heard my cry. He lifted me up out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire, and He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth. Let me tell you what. I've tried to write songs before. It's not my gifting. It's not my talent. I've got friends. I have one friend. He's deceased now, and I did his funeral a couple of years ago. And he wrote songs for people all over the world. He wrote songs for people like Alison Krauss. And he wrote songs with people like Tom T. Hall, for those of you that are older and country music fan. And he wrote songs, and he was just gifted. He could write a song off of anything. I couldn't do that. But David said that when you've been in that mud pit, when you've been down in the mud, when you've been down in the pit, he said when God brings you out, that he put a new song in my mouth, and he put a hymn of praise to our God. And he said, many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord. So you may be stuck in the mud. You may be buried into the pit. You may be down to the axles. I remember when I was a teenager, and we didn't live on a huge farm or anything like that, but I certainly didn't grow up in town. There's about 50 acres or so out there at my dad's place, and most of it, unfortunately, is grown up now. And these guys, this family lived beside of us. They didn't have a lot of land, but they had a little bit, but they were all the time, one of the guys was all the time buying stuff. And he bought this tractor, and he bought a rear tine tiller to go on his tractor. And he decides he's going to make a garden down in this bottom. And he goes down in the bottom, and he's tilling along with these little Ford. He's tilling along. And by the way, I do like Ford tractors. Tell Scott Browning when you see him. And he's tilling with his Ford tractor, and he gets his tractor stuck. He buried that tractor up to the axle. So he goes and he gets another tractor to pull that tractor out. And he buried that tractor up to the axle trying to pull the first tractor out. So he says, I know what I'll do. I'll go get my GMC truck and I'll pull the first tractor out with my GMC truck. And he hooks his GMC truck to the second tractor, actually. And he hooks it to the second tractor, and then he gets his GMC truck stuck. I go get our Massey out of the shed. And I pull the truck out. And then I pull the second tractor out. But I couldn't pull the first one out. It took us hooking his truck, his tractor, and our tractor to get that first one out. He had it stuck that bad. You know? And sometimes in life, we will get stuck so bad that it seems like there's really not a way out. It seems like that we feel like there's no hope. I'm stuck in this situation. There's no way out. There's nothing I can do. I can't be helped. And a lot of times we diagnose our situation and we think, hey, it's just hopeless for me. It's hopeless for me. There's nothing I can do. Now listen, you may be stuck, but let me tell you something. The mud will not last forever. God has deliverance for you. God has an answer for you. God has a way for you. And sometimes, though, we confuse a holy delay for God not answering us. Sometimes we expect God and we're looking for Him to come and do what He will do and do it quickly. Sometimes we pray, and let me tell you something, folks. I know people that have prayed over circumstances and situations. I know people that have been faithful to prayer for years and years and years, but they're still being faithful to prayer. The answer hasn't come. They're still stuck in the mud, or somebody's stuck in the mud. Circumstances are in the mud, but they haven't given up because somehow they have called a faith like David had here, and they know that there is hope. Listen, there is hope. Hope may not come in the time frame that you want it to come in. It may not happen in the way that you want it to happen, but just because it doesn't work out exactly that way, it doesn't mean that you don't have an answer. It doesn't mean that God's ears have turned deaf to you. But don't confuse a holy delay for being a non-answer, because God heard the prayer. God heard David's prayer when he cried. God heard Joseph's prayer when he cried out of the pit. God heard the cry of Paul and Silas as they were in jail. God hears our cries. He hears our calls. He is by bottling every tear that you have ever shed up. And someday those tears will be opened and poured out as a memorial before Him. Listen, there is nothing in your life, there is nothing you're going through that if you will trust God with it, that He has turned a blind eye to or a deaf ear. God is there for you. You may be stuck in the mud, but listen, just be patient because help is on the way. And this is what God will do. It may not be on your time span. It may not be in your frame of mind. But here's what God will do, because this is what God did for David. Number one, He will respond. David said, He heard my cry. He heard my cry. You know, sometimes, and don't draw a misconception of who God is here, okay? But sometimes God desires to hear our cry. He desires for us to say, you know, Abba Father, Daddy God, Daddy, I need your help. Daddy, I need you to pull me out of the mud. I'm a man of stories this morning. You're probably saying he is all the time. Across the road from us was a dairy farm. And this dairy farm milked somewhere between 100 and 150 cows. Every day, twice a day. Any of y'all ever been around a dairy barn? Yeah. You know what being around a dairy barn's like? A dairy barn where there's nothing but concrete walkways and everything else is not concrete. Can anybody testify right now that you understand what I'm talking about? And that's why people that work on dairy farms most of the time are wearing the rubber gun boots with their britches leg. That's what we call pants for fancy folks. The britches leg tucked down inside of the rubber boots. Because there is mud, among other things, around a dairy barn. My longest friend that I've ever had in the world outside of family, and I'm going to see him later today, my friend Robbie Williams. And he may listen to this sometime. My friend Robbie Williams and I, we were mean as striped snakes, at least according to my mom. But she loved me. Robbie said, go around the barn. We were supposed to be feeding calves. He said, walk around the milk barn and get something. And I went to go around to get a bucket, I believe it was. So I went to go around the milk barn. Well, apparently it was a lack of communication. I went around the wrong side of the barn. And I had on his mama's rubber boots, which were too big for me. We're just little kids. And the further I walked, the further I sunk in the mud. Yeah, we'll leave it at mud. The further I walked, the further I sunk. So here I started hollering, Robbie, you got to come get me. And I had on my new corduroy jacket from Goodwill. Because we just got off the bus. I'd get off and I'd go up on the farm with them 3 or 4 days a week. So I'm in my new corduroy jacket. I'm sunk into mud. And I want to tell you something. I don't know, I was probably 6, 8 years old at that time. Let me tell you something. At 6 and 8 years old, I was as tall as I am now. Okay? So I'm up to mud. I'm sunk up to mud, and I holler for Robbie. And Robbie, right here comes Robbie. He said, what are you doing over here? I said, I was doing what you told me. I didn't tell you to come this way. And I said, you didn't tell me to go either way. He said, let me come pull you out. Now, he wasn't as stocky as I was. You know, I was a chubby little thing then. You say, so don't you even think it. Don't you even think it. I was a chubby little thing then, and Robbie is a little old skinny guy, and he's not as tall as me. He hits me about right here. So Robbie comes to pull me out of the mud in his gun boots, you know. And he's pulling on me, and every time he pulls on me and he's rocking, he's sinking too. And I know it's hard to visualize this, but all of a sudden, he's pulling on me and he's trying to get me out of the mud. He's sinking in the mud. He gets off balance and he falls towards me in my new corduroy coat from Goodwill. He's laying on top of me. And I'm stuck in the mud. Robbie's daddy, be patient with me as I tell the story. Robbie's daddy, John, I love him. They're family to me. They are family to me, so no disrespect. But Robbie's daddy has a stuttering problem. And he hears us hollering, and here comes John around the corner of the barn, and he's like this. What y'all doing, boys? And of course, it was my fault. Robbie blamed it on me, and I blamed it on him. But you know what? John is not a big man, but he was bigger than we were, and he was Robbie's daddy, and he was my daddy while I was there on the farm, so to speak. But you know what? Daddy come, he heard our cry, and he come, and he grabbed Robbie by the belt and lifted him off the top of me and drug him out of the mud. And then he comes back and he pulls me out of the mud, and they go in and they make me take off all of my clothes. And we're like family, you know. Of course, yeah, it was done in privacy, but I take off all of my clothes. I put on some clothes they had there at the house, and Robbie's mama, Dolly, she puts everything in the washing machine. They had automatic washer and dryer. It was really cool because all we had was a wringer washing machine. She puts everything in the washing machine, and she washes it and she dries it. And by the time my dad come up on the farm to pick me up, guess what? Nobody knew it had happened. And I told her, I said, don't y'all tell Mama what happened. I'll be in trouble. Bunch of liars. Told me they wouldn't. No. They did tell my mama. And it's still a fun story among our families today. But you know what? It took somebody bigger and stronger than myself to pull me out of the mud, out of the muck, out of the mire, we used to call it manuki. It took somebody. Listen, John came when he heard us boys hollering. God will come when He hears us. He will respond. He will come to us. He will give us attention. He has not forgot about you. He has not turned a deaf ear to you. He has not turned you away. He has not turned me away. And He will respond to whatever manuki and mud that you are in. God will respond to you. He has heard your cry. He has heard your voice. And today, even last night and yesterday I was talking to the Lord, and in my spirit, it was like He said, today you need to bring hope to somebody's life. You need to speak encouragement to somebody's life that the place that they're stuck in right now is not the place that they will be in forever, because the mud is going to dry up. I will respond. And when He responded, here's what God did according to David. He said, you rescued me. You not only heard me, you know what? It wasn't good enough for John to hear us boys whining and crying with Robbie laying on top of me and us down in the mud. That wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. He could have stood over and said, well, what's wrong with you all? I got picked at the other day. I was with Sister Sarah, and the staff that she works with in Pulaski. We went out to lunch, and I love Sister Sarah. I mean this with no disregard to my wife. I love my wife very much, and I give her honor. But Sister Sarah she has a little bit of problem every once in a while. She'll fall. She'll just fall. It used to be worse. You know, the church that she works at, they have their podium is like this tall. And when I was first met her, you know, we were in a dating relationship. I saw her fall off the top of that thing, you know, and she doesn't fall as much now. And some of it was health related, okay? But the other day we were at the restaurant eating, and she had gotten up to go somewhere there at the restaurant, and all of a sudden I hear poop, and everybody else at the tables jumped up and Sarah, are you all right? Are you all right? And she was right beside me when she landed. And I guess, I don't know. I love you, baby. I'm not being insensitive, but I'm sort of used to it, you know. Used to it. I just look at her and said, you gonna be all right? Most times she's just saying, you just leave me alone, just leave me alone, just leave me alone. That's the way we work through it. And everybody else was over there, are you all right? Even the guy, listen, the guy that owned the restaurant, he came over and he said, oh, I heard you had a fall. And I said, tell him you don't sue it. Tell him you don't. No, I didn't do that. I didn't. But he brought her a big old piece of red velvet cake that she can't eat anyway. Gave it to her. But you know what? She fell down, and I'm being very transparent. I'm just turning around and saying, well, what happened? You know, while the rest of the people are panicking to go run and help her up. But you know what? God doesn't stand afar off and look at us and say, well, what happened? Well, how'd you get there? You know? Yeah. It's like, you know, we used to roof, and every once in a while, when roofing houses, and I would mash a finger while we were doing roofing. It was a very common occurrence to get a mashed finger. And I had my uncle that was the boss, the chief of the whole operation. You know, his response to me many times was, it'll feel better after it quits hurting. God's not like that with us, though. God's not like it. He responds to us, and He comes to rescue us. And when He comes to rescue us, He will rescue us and He will pull us out. And even we may be in the mud up to our necks. We may be up to the chin in mud. But listen to me. God not only responds, but He comes to rescue. And thirdly, He doesn't only come to rescue, but He comes to restore. And David identifies with that you heard my cry. You heard my cry. You pulled me out of the mud, but now you restored me. You brought me out of mud and you put me on a rock. Going back to my story about on the dairy farm. You know, it wasn't just enough that they pulled me out of the mud, but the fact of the matter is that they took me in the house and they give me some clean clothes to put on, and they not only put clean clothes on me, but they took the clothes that were soiled from the barn lot and they put them in the wash machine and they washed them and dried them. And man, when I went home, man, I was looking good. I was smelling good. Everything was all good. Everything was all happy till my mom found out. But everything was good. Everything was happy. But listen to me. When God responds and He rescues us, then He will restore us. The mud that is caked up under the tires and in the fenders and all up under the old pickup truck, He cleans it out, He washes it up, and He restores us and puts us in a place that is better than we were before. So you may be stuck in the mud now, but it's not the intention of God that you stay there forever. You may be stuck in the mud and everything may seem difficult right now, but God has something better for you. In fact, Jesus addressed it in Matthew chapter 7. Jesus says this, verse 9. He said, which of you I will ask, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask Him? God wants us. He wants us to be blessed. He wants us to prosper, not in the sense of some of the stuff you hear. God's not. He's not interested in making us rich. We're already rich in Him. That's not the point at all. But He does want us to prosper, and He does want us to bless it. And it's not His will that we dwell in the slimy pit forever. It's not His will that we dwell in that pit. But you know what? Some people, sometimes I think they may have just become acclimated and just are content with dwelling in the mud pit. Sometimes people are just satisfied in dwelling there. So God brings us out of the mud pit. And when He brings us out of the mud pit, what God gives, He not only rescues us, but He gives us stability. That's what the rock signifies. The rock is a stable place. The rock is a solid place. The rock is an immovable place. The rock is a solid place. And listen to this. Whatever caused us to find ourselves in the mud pit, I don't know. Maybe we just slipped and fell into it. Maybe we were at the wrong place at the wrong time and the wrong place at the right time even. But one thing for sure is the reason that it's hard to get out of the mud is because it's not stable under your feet. There's nothing solid there to grab out. But when God lifts you out and God puts your feet on the solid rock and He puts your feet on solid ground, He brings stability to your life. So He not only wants to deliver you from your problems, but He also wants to plant you in a place where you can firmly stand for Him. And He wants to make you stronger than you were before. Two things that occur out of the pit. The first one is God will be revered. God will be revered. You know what? I told you the story, and you understand the hero of the story was John Williams. John pulled Robbie and myself out of the pit. Who knows how long we could have laid there in the Manuki? Who knows how long I could have laid there on my back and this little blonde-headed, curly-haired guy laying right on top of me, you know. But John heard her. And John became the hero of the story. And the hero of your story, the hero of my story is not really John, but the hero of my story is Jesus. The hero of your story is Jesus, because you've been in the pit, you've been in that place, you've been buried down, you've been bogged down, and now all of a sudden there is a hero, there is a champion, there is somebody to come along and pull you out of the pit, and His name is Jesus, and He is to be revered. We call that worship, we call that praise, but whatever you want to call it is okay, but Jesus is to be, I once was lost, but now I'm found. It was I once was stuck in the mud, but now I'm standing upon the solid rock. It's Jesus that is to be revered, because He has brought you from a place that was not good. He's brought you from a place that was not prosperous for you or to you. So we bring Him our praise, and we bring Him our worship, and we find ourselves getting out of the mud. But we get out of the mud not because of our resources, but because of His. Because of His. So there's nobody else to gain the praise other than Jesus. And He's to be revered for His praise. Secondly, what happens is because Jesus is, if He hasn't already pulled you out of the mud, He's fixing to. And because you've been pulled out of the mud, and because He's getting ready to pull you out of the mud, He's to be revered, but He's going to be revealed. Because David said this in the Psalm, he said, "Many will see and fear and put their trust in the Lord." You know what? I wish that every single one of us, including me own self, I wish every single one of us in this room could go through life and never have a problem, never have a difficulty. We can never goof our lives up. We can never mess up. I wish that every single one of us could live our life and never have to find ourselves in a mud pit. But it hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen. We're going to find ourselves stuck in that mud pit. There's some time in our life, and you may be there right now. You're stuck in that mud pit. But God doesn't intend for us to be there. He doesn't intend for us to remain there. But through His deliverance, He's to be revered, but He is also revealed. Because let me tell you something. Whether you realize it or not, you may think you've been keeping it hid. And you may have kept it hid from a lot of people. But listen to me. Whether it's known by the masses or not, is not exactly the issue here. But there are other people know that you're stuck in the mud pit. There's other people that know, and there's other people that recognize and realize that there's things that have gripped your life, and there's things that have stronghold on your life. There's things, and listen, it may not be sinful thing. It may be a mud pit of depression. It may be a mud pit of anxiety. It may be a mud pit of health issues. It may be a mud pit of financial issues. It could be a mud pit of sin that you've sunk yourself into or found yourself sunk into. But listen to this. When God lifts you out, there's going to be people that are going to look at you and say, hey, you are not that same old Nathan that I used to know. Or you're not that same old Rosetta I used to know. Or you're not that same old Charlie that I used to know. What has happened to you? It's an opportunity for Jesus to be revealed. He is already being revealed to you, and you can tell those people, I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was once stuck in the mud, but now I'm on the solid rock. Glory be to God. Praise be to Jesus. I am what I am, not because of who I am, but because of who He is. And when you allow Him to work in your life, and He reveals Himself through you, then He is uplifted and He is glorified. And He relieves us out of these slimy pits. And here's what happens. Here's what happens. What happens is, and I'm just being very random here, and I'm not insinuating anything about anybody, but when Nathan says, somebody says, man, what has changed in your life, Nathan? What has happened to you? You know, you used to be a whatever. And he could share that word, and he could share that testimony, and he could share that work, that work that Jesus has done in his life. And he can tell somebody else, and somebody else that may have been just like him, been in the same pit where he was in. That person will realize, well, if God will lift Nathan out of that pit, He'll lift me out of that pit too. Amen. Because let me tell you something, there's pits that I was in, there's pits that I have been in, and there's some of the pits that I've been in are the same pits that you may be in right now. But as sure as God has been faithful to lift me out of a pit, He can lift you out of a pit. As sure as I can be pulled out of the barnyard, you can be pulled out of the barnyard. Because He is not a respecter of person. So no matter what it is that has grip on your life, God, if He's done it for one, He'll do it for you. So there is nothing too big. There's nothing, no pit too deep. There is no mud too sticky. There is nothing that will hinder God from coming and pulling you out of the mud pit. So don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up, because He will pull you out. He will restore you. He will set your feet on a solid rock, and He will be revered and revealed through the work that has gone on in your life. Carrie, if you'll come and play some, sir. So you may not see the purpose of what you're going through right now. You may not see it, and you may not understand. You may be here and you may say, man, I've been a believer most all of my life. I've been a follower of Jesus nearly all of my life. Why has this happened to me? Let me tell you something. The greater glory of God is being manifest through us when we find ourselves as believers in the mud pit. Because you know what? I could go through my life and I could never have a problem in the world. I could go through my life and never have a problem in the world. And but let's think about it in some realistic terms. If we never had a problem in our world, if there was nothing that if there was never a mud pit that we could call on our daddy God to pull us out of, if there was never a mud pit of life, what glory would we give God to say, oh man, everything's just perfect and hunky-dory and lovely in my life. I've been tiptoeing through the tulips and I've been doing all this stuff, everything has been good in my life. But it's when we can stand up and say, I was in a pit up to my neck, but God pulled me out. I walked through the fires of hell, but I wasn't burned. I had to walk through them, but I wasn't burned. But God pulled me out. I had to sleep in a bunch of raving and roaring lions that hadn't been fed in weeks and days. But listen, God was good to me, and I came out. So no matter what you've been through, no matter what you're going through, no matter what we face in life, understand this. When we find ourselves in those situations, let the greater glory go to God. Keep the faith. Trust Him. Don't give up on believing in Him. Follow Him every step of the way, because the mud is not going to last forever. He's made a way. He's going to come and He's going to rescue you. And when He does, all the glory, all the praise, and all the honor will go unto Him. And then you'll impact somebody else's life. So if it's muddy in your life right now, just hang on. Just hang on. If things are muddy in your life right now, just hang on. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you have trusted Him as your Savior, hang on, because He hasn't forgot about you. He hasn't turned His head away from you. His eyes are not blinded towards you, and His ear is not deaf. That's my word for believers in this house this morning. Don't you dare give up. Don't you dare give up. If you're in this room this morning and you've never been saved, and you don't have that relationship with Jesus, you're not that follower of Jesus, let me tell you something. I love you, and I don't mean this in a degrading way, because any of us in this room, before we're saved, we're in the biggest mud pit that can ever be known to humanity. And it's a mud pit it's in that mud pit of sin and unforgiveness that some people actually die. But Jesus has made a way. His arms stretched as far as it can be stretched. They both were stretched across the cross at Calvary. And if you understood about the process of Roman crucifixion, when Jesus was nailed to the cross, his arms were actually jerked. He was stretched to the maximum. It's possible that it even could have been some dislocation in the shoulders where they stretched His arms so tightly. So He stretched as far as He could stretch just for you, in a manner of speaking, physically. So if you're here this morning and you've not trusted Jesus as your Savior, I got good news for you. You don't have to stay stuck in the mud either. Because He's got a way. He's got the means to pull you out. Old John Williams pulled myself and his son Robbie. He pulled us out of the mud. They cleaned us up. And we grow up to be, both of us, quite handsome young men. No, but the reality of it is, Jesus wants to bless you. If you're saved, He wants to continue to bless you. You may be stuck in the mud right now, but He's not forgotten you. If you're unsaved, He wants to bless you. He wants to pull you out of that mud. And He set your feet on the solid rock to stand. The solid rock to stand. It can rain all it wants to all week long, but I want to tell you something. It could rain all week long, and in a manner of speaking, I guess it's possible scientifically, but in a manner of speaking, it can rain as long as it wants to rain, and a rock may erode away, and a certain sand rock or something may get soft, but the reality of it is a rock will never really turns to mud. Okay? So when God pulls us out and He sets our feet on that rock to stand, it's a firm foundation. It's a firm place. I just want you to bow your heads and close your eyes with me right now. And as I look across this room and even speak to our Facebook audience and our Extreme Voice Radio audience, or even some maybe later in this week listening by podcast. No matter if you're saint or sinner, if you're stuck in the mud, don't give up hope. The mud won't last forever. God's on His way to pull you out. And quite frankly, I believe this. I believe today is your day. I believe today is your day. Today is your day. God has heard your cry, and He's coming to your rescue. You've been waiting a long time. But today, quite possibly, could be your day. If you're in this room and you're unsaved, you've never asked Jesus to save you, and you're not in that saving relationship with God through Jesus Christ, without embarrassing you in any way, nobody's looking around, heads are bowed, eyes are closed. But if that's you in this house this morning, in this room, that you need to be saved, and again, I won't embarrass you, but would you just slip up your hand and say, Pastor, pray for me? Is there one in this room? I take it that everybody in this room is content with your relationship with Jesus. But let me ask you another question. You're in this room and you're a believer. You know you're saved. You're confident you're saved. You're confident that you have a relationship with God. But you're just really stuck in the mud right now. You're just really stuck in the mud. You went around the wrong side of the barn, like I did. You're not just up to your ankles, you're knee deep, you're waist deep. You may be up to your neck in mud right now. And you really just don't think there's much hope that you'll ever get out. If that's you, without embarrassment in any way, would you just slip up your hands so we can know, Pastor, pray for me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. A number of hands. Thank you. A number of hands that have went up in this place. I already told you to no embarrassment. No embarrassment. But what I would like to do is, I would like to ask those who've slipped up your hand, if you would like special prayer this morning, I would like for you to come. But what I would like for you to understand is every one of us in this room, at some point in time, we have been in the mud pit of life. So I'm going to ask everybody that would like to join you, and I'm not going to ask you to come first. I'm just asking for people right now, all over our congregation here, and we're going to say goodbye to our Facebook audience right now. Thank you for joining us today. But as we go into this altar service, I would like for you to come and along with everybody else. So could you join me? Could you join me?